My ex-wife manipulated my family against me and held my kid for years after our divorce. I told her about her mother as an adult. I never planned to disclose this story in public, but events have forced me to. The last 2 weeks have been a roller coaster. Maybe someone can tell me if I'm the villain. Over time I, 48M, have felt many things in the past decade. I never expected the outcome. My marriage to Laura, Emily's mother, started it all years ago. Laura and I were high school sweethearts and seemed inseparable. We were young, hopeful, and ready to tackle the world together. Life may break even the strongest connections, and our fractures rapidly grow. Linkage was clear. We lived in a modest home, but Laura came from a wealthy family and was used to luxury. Despite our arguments, I loved her and supported her like she was used to. Now it was time to live differently. We balked, battled to form when it came to athletic achievement. Linkage was clear. We lived in a modest home, but Laura came from a wealthy family and was used to. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. Due of my stress trying to please Laura, our marriage began to break down. Our relationship became tense as arguments intensified. Laura seemed detached, like she was thinking another thing. I kept trying to contact her to find out what was wrong, but she ignored me and said that everything was fine. Later, I was devastated to learn that Laura had cheated on me multiple times during our divorce. Realization hit me immediately. Despite my sacrifices for our marriage and late nights working to maintain our family, she was cheating on me the whole time. I put Emily, our daughter, first despite the sorrow and betrayal. She was 11, and I wanted to help her. However, the divorce arrangement crushed that hope. Laura insisted on making me our villain. She falsely accused me of neglect and emotional detachment, even suggesting abuse. Laura was convincing enough to turn my parents and siblings against me. Everyone believed her story, thinking I did something terrible to make her cheat. I felt like I was on an island, alone, and no one would listen. I tried hard, but the judge sided with Laura in the long legal battle. She had full custody of Emily and I had restricted visits. Laura wrecked my limited visits to my kid. She often forgot appointments or said Emily was sick or had other obligations. Even though I promised to transport Emily to school, Laura wouldn't let me influence her. Support her endeavors. Since we've always been close to Emily, my family helped Laura keep my daughter away from me. They wanted to remove me from Emily's life. It was beyond my control. I suffered through my worst years afterward. Even though it was hard, I tried to understand why Emily would rather stay with her mother than come to me. Children favor one parent over the other, right? It became clear that a deeper evil motive was behind it. Emily brought a list of complaints to our appointments. I supposedly said or did something bad. I was confused since it was all false. When I tried to talk to Laura, she either ignored me or changed the subject to make me seem suspicious. My attempts to stay in touch with Emily became harder with time. Phone calls and letters were unanswered, and Laura and my family were unfriendly when I visited. They all seemed determined to remove me from Emily's life. Emily's worst moment was at 13. She stated that she would no longer see me. She spoke, so coldly, as if I meant nothing to her. My heart broke. I didn't want to drag Emily through a complicated legal battle, even though Laura had lied to her. After all, she wanted to stay with her mother, and taking her away would make things worse. Since I didn't want to cause her further trouble, I reluctantly agreed to step back. This was one of my hardest decisions. It took a long time for her to grasp the truth and return to me, but I never quit up. That she would. Years later, I slowly recovered from that terrible experience. We clicked immediately when we met Megan. Megan took the fight to me, and we became good friends. We took our time getting to know each other before getting married due to my past experiences. We lived together, and I spent most of my time with Megan's 2 kids. Though I loved my new family, I wondered about Emily. She felt, what? What had she become? I asked Laura about Emily several times throughout the years, but she never replied. Although I built her up a lot to convince myself Emily was better off without me, I felt like I had left her. One day, Emily unexpectedly approached me. She was 20 and wrote a simple letter. She wanted to chat. She demanded information about our family and why I wasn't supporting her. Reading her message made my heart race. It was unnerving to think meeting my daughter after all this time, but I was determined to see her. I felt nervous and hopeful. Maybe this was the time I'd been waiting for. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe. I was anxiously awaiting her arrival. I scarcely recognized her when she entered. Although she had grown into a beautiful young woman, her eyes showed her hurt and wrath. As we sat across from each other, the tension was clear, and she had been grieving for a long time. She wanted answers, and I knew they would be hard to hear. I inhaled deeply before telling her the truth. No holds barred. I told her how her mother and family had purposely turned her against me, invented every incident to depict me as the villain, and tried to get involved in her life. Life, despite everything. She learned about Laura's adultery and divorce lies from me. I described what happened over the next few hours. I had old court records, emails, and texts to support my claim. I wanted Emily to know I wasn't the monster she was taught about, and that I knew what she was told. The racial profile of women at the monastery. As I told Emily what happened, she sat stunned. She grew up thinking I abandoned her and didn't care about her. She was overwhelmed by the truth. I didn't force her answer, because she was clearly listening. I knew this was too much for her. She finally spoke with a shaken voice. She wondered why I never retaliated or tried harder to stay in her life. That question crushed me. I explained that I thought backing off and not getting her embroiled in a legal issue would best protect her. Even if she hated me, I wanted her to have a happy childhood. Honestly, I wish I had fought harder. It hurt me to let Laura and her family go. Steer the tale. Emily seemed to be grasping the full extent of what had happened. Though furious with me, she was mostly upset with her mother. Laura went to great lengths to appear like a better parent, which shocked her. Emily decided to act. She wanted to confront her mother and explain everything. I was surprised but proud of her self-defense. Emily was no longer the youngster I knew 10 years before. She could defend herself as a powerful woman. This might also affect her, I worried. I was relieved when she said she wasn't sure how to go with our relationship. She wanted to meet and converse more, but she was used to her father's absence. Laura sent me angry messages and calls 2 days later. Emily evidently challenged her with my advice. Laura was furious and accused me of damaging their relationship by turning Emily against her. Emily's next move astonished me. She told me she'll sue Laura for parental alienation yesterday by phone. She wants to sue for emotional harm from years of lying and manipulation. Laura continues calling me. She wants me to get Emily to discontinue it. Case. Switching between threats and pleas. My family is also contacting me to apologize. No idea. On one hand, I'm delighted Emily finally found out. It was never my desire for things to get this terrible. Since I care for Megan, the kids, and Emily, I'm not sure I can endure the same mental pressure. I don't want to contribute to the sorrow or drama, but Laura and my family must take responsibility. To summarize, I've been conflicted. Emily's fight against her abuse and quest of the truth make me proud. However, I worried about her. Because the legal system is flawed, I didn't want her to suffer anymore. Ruthless, especially with relatives. I tried to support her remotely by letting her know I was there when she needed her, but letting her make her own decisions. I can't convey how much Laura and my family are stressing me out. Despite this complicated situation, I'm wondering if AITA was right to tell my daughter the truth about her mother and our past. How ridiculous is that? What do I know? I put in. Ruthless, especially. My wife probably would rather than my daughter and I fail. She's worrying me. I appreciate your comments and suggestions. Welcome to the first update. Personally, I expected the situation to worsen. As expected, since Laura didn't care about others, therefore confrontations with her were difficult. I didn't know if our kid was included. Emily arrived at our place with tearful eyes, after fighting with her mother. She wasn't shy this time. She shared all her 8-year bad experiences. Laura seems unprepared for motherhood despite having one custody. Mother, much less raise a child. Emily said Laura wasn't home half the time. Emily was left alone for days while she was away, at least half the time. Laura was drunk and unstable at home. Emily remembered Laura returning home furious, hurling objects, screaming, and once accusing her of being to responsibility for her own problems. My heart broke as she expressed her loneliness and fear. However, worst was still to come. Emily revealed 2 troubled memories. First time, she was 13. Laura left her for the weekend without food or money. Emily tried cooking for herself, however, her hand burned badly. Laura didn't answer the phone when she called, despite her pain. Emily, a youngster, walked to the nearest hospital with a towel on her hand. She was alone, afraid, and in pain in the emergency room for hours before a nurse helped her. Emily showed me her hand scar, a memory of her mother's cruelty. Remember, the second time was terrible, the 15-year-old Laura drinking excessively for weeks. Emily tried to avoid Laura, but one night she attacked. In her rage, she threw a glass at Emily, which injured her leg badly. Laura shouted at Emily to tidy up despite her bleeding and shock. Emily was so scared that she covered her leg with an old shirt and returned to the hospital for sutures. Emily's stories brought up pain and wrath I hadn't felt in a while. Grief for Emily and wrath at Laura for inflicting this nightmare. She didn't, a child, she didn't deserve this. Her abandonment, sorrow, and fear weren't deserved. Whoever was supposed to protect her shouldn't have looked down on her. This was emotional and physical abuse. Ironically, the things she accused me of doing to distance my daughter from me were her daily habit. All of this might have been avoided if Laura had let me watch my baby. Unable to watch my baby on my own. I was unable to watch my baby by myself. Emily may have had a happy childhood if she hadn't been so self-centered and resentful. I listened to Emily all night with Megan. We made sure she was safe and comfortable. Megan comforted Emily by holding her hand and said she had nothing to do with anything. Emily needed someone to tell her she was loved and significant. Emily's apology was devastating and bittersweet. She apologized even though she had nothing to apologize for. She apologized for pushing me away, not seeing the reality sooner, and accepting her mother's falsehoods. She broke down as she told me how much she missed me and how often she had imagined life with me. I told her I missed her and had always loved and thought about her. Hearing her apologies was painful, but it meant we were finally close again after all these years. I didn't need her apology because she was a victim. Then, she introduced me to my kid's mother. I also became tired of avoiding family issues and playing it safe. I would go to court with my ex-wife to get my kid the apology and recompense she deserved for her welfare. Was risky. After a night of comforting and talking, Emily and I made a plan the next morning. We planned to tell my family about Emily's lies, negligence, and abuse. I was tired of them acting like the perfect family while Laura ruined Emily's childhood. Emily retained medical records, text messages, and Laura's voicemails, which gave the evidence we needed. Time to uncover the truth and tell them the entire cost of their cooperation. Emily looked anxious, but I saw a resolution in her eyes I had never seen before. She was ready to fight them. I would be with her. I was convinced we would handle whatever came up because we were finally getting the punishment we deserved. Everything will be announced to you first. I appreciate your compassion and insights into my situation. It's crucial. I'll keep updating since this isn't the end. Update 2. Hope everyone is well. Are you recalling family conflict Emily and I planned? That happened, and it was eventful. As soon as we entered the house after my daughter and I decided to surprise them, I could see their shock. They couldn't imagine seeing us together after all these years. They never thought years of dishonesty, manipulation, and distance could be overturned so swiftly. We stood united, ready to meet them. After the initial astonishment, they quickly put on their usual anxiety. My mother spoke first. She asked Emily if I upset her, her phony concern in his voice. It stung because it showed how deeply they believed Laura's narrative. Not because I cared what they thought of me. It was awful to think I would damage my daughter, yet they believed it. They may have assumed the worst of me because it was easier to defend their own behavior. Emily was no longer the fearful, puzzled child they had known, and I was no longer Laura. Emily advanced before I could respond. Her quiet firmness and steady voice made me proud. They hadn't helped her. She warned them to quit pretending like they cared throughout the years. She spoke confidently. She blamed them for their disinterest, allowing Laura to abuse and neglect her, and ruining her upbringing. My brothers and parents tried to mask their unease. They seemed dissatisfied instead than worried. They detested conflict, especially with Emily, whom they still saw as a child who should appreciate their meager care. Emily was gone, a youngster, and she didn't care about their empty explanations. It was a decade after they made their first visit to Laura in explanations that Emily stopped by for the first time. I read comments asking how Laura turned my family against me so easily. Our relationship was plagued by unresolved issues and long-suppressed resentment. I had no meaningful connection with my siblings because of our ongoing antagonism. Thus, we were never close. Instead of promoting unity, my parents sided with the child who would help them most. Laura's divorce proposal allowed them to unleash their long-standing animosity, anger at me. They cared more about making amends and bringing me down than about Emily and me. Emily detailed Laura's desertion, bruises, and anguish, and I could see their unease as they turned a blind eye. They were unprepared for this challenge, especially from someone they had devalued. Other things hurt besides the comments. Emily held them accountable for their platitudes. Naturally, we didn't share everything. Didn't have to show all cards. Text messages, medical records, and other data could be used. Quickly deconstruct their carefully built tale. We gave enough material to show we were serious and that this wasn't an emotional outburst, but we kept most of it concealed. Things were about to become worse. and this was a message that we were done playing by their rules. We left without waiting for a response. They couldn't say anything useful. Nothing could undo years of agony and neglect they had allowed. Emily offered us one last message before leaving. "Give it to Laura," she said, to warn her that we would bring a serious case. There was a deafening silence as we left, heavy with anticipation and unspoken words. Emily and I had drawn our line in the sand, so we couldn't go back. The family had always profited from having us apart and at odds, but now that Emily and I were standing together, they would suffer. Your advice has been invaluable, and you know I read every word. Comment frequently. Your cooperation is much appreciated. Update 3. Thank you to everyone who has supported and encouraged me. The previous several days have been the worst of my life, yet I see a way forward, so prepare for a long one. I called one of our attorneys immediately after the event at my family's residence. Laura had hurt Emily and me, and I wouldn't allow her get away with it. Emily was astonished when I advised legal action. She wanted no legal action. She wasn't forgiving or uncaring about her mother. Emily prioritized differently today. So much had happened to her. She had big dreams and a successful academic career. She couldn't delay that to sue her mother. She made me proud as her parent. Despite everything that had happened to her, she remained a bright, strong young woman with a bright future. I couldn't help but feel conflicted, though. There was a part of me that wanted Laura to pay for her acts and cope with the aftermath from the suffering she had brought about. It was one thing to wreck my life, but I couldn't forgive Emily for being injured and deprived of a typical, comfortable childhood. The last thing I did before I retired was I took a warning shot at my mother, and I waited for her to close the door before hitting her with the mason jar, stabbing her through the heart. I respected Emily's wishes. Her view was valued here, unlike her mother's, and I always considered that when making decisions. We had another event while negotiating. A day or two later, Laura's neighbor brought an envelope to our door. Due to her absence, Laura was asked to deliver the letter to us, according to the neighbor. I accepted the packet and thanked the neighbor, unsure what to expect. Laura wrote on the envelope. She apologized and defended her behavior for a long time. She wrote how things went wrong after I left, how she lost her job, and how lonely she felt. She found another job, but it paid poorly, worsening her depression. She said she never meant to hurt Emily but was so lost and suffering that drinking became her coping mechanism. Laura described more of her trials to show a woman driven to the edge by uncontrollable events, and the woman hurt herself first. Letter 97. Laura's best friend, but all I could think about. It seemed useless while reading. Laura was clearly trying to rationalize her conduct by blaming her circumstances. However, no suffering could justify her treatment of Emily. The letter ended with her pleading not to go to court. She offered to do whatever we thought was fair for the harm she did, and pledged to avoid Emily. Emily's eyes showed sadness as she read the letter I gave her. This wasn't the resolution she deserved, and it wasn't the apologies she had desired. What type of mother abandons her child in this way and then feels that financial prosperity would somehow compensate for the years of agony and disregard? For Emily, the realization was terrible, and I was aware that she needed time to take it all in. I gave Emily space, knowing she would contact me or Megan when ready. Emily confided in my wife Megan without fear of penalties. Emily instantly felt attached to Megan's kids and our family. Even though I wanted to help, knew Megan's insight and support would help Emily absorb everything. After some time, Emily contacted me with her choice. She has no intention to seek legal action. She didn't want to draw things out anymore or become entangled in a lengthy court struggle. She wanted to focus on her future and forget the past. Even though I wanted justice for Emily, I understood that this was the right decision, and she was prepared to go on. She had lived with the consequences of her mother's errors long enough. She needed to live her life according to her own rules. Emily chose, so we entered a new stage of life. She focused more on her education, dedicating herself to her goals. Megan and I guided and inspired her through this new period of her life. It feels like a dream. Nothing could have gone better, and I have 3 children and a great wife. We found each other after a long and painful trip. Above all, that was the victory. I appreciate everyone's support. An eventful journey. I think we're now on the right track. Goodbye.